Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to an ever so slightly sunburnt episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from Dying Fetus, entitled Make Them Beg for Death! This is the 9th full-length studio album and the first release of any kind in just about 6 years from one of America's most iconic and influential brutal death metal institutions. For me personally, when I even think of brutal death metal, Dying Fetus is one of the first bands that comes to mind, and still to this day also one of the best, one of the most consistent. Early records like Purification Through Violence and Killing on Adrenaline are so grimy and nasty and gnarly. They're just covered in blood and mucus and pus and garbage, and I mean that in the best way possible. Purification Through Violence especially, it occupies a territory similar to that of like Reek of Putrefaction from Carcass or gore metal from Exhumed. And then going into the 2000s, you have stuff like Destroy the Opposition and War of Attrition, which on top of upping the production value big time, as well as the technicality, the complexity, the nuance, the depth of the music, and also the brutality of the music, it also went into way more political and provocative territory, lyrically and conceptually, tackling the failures of the American judicial system, federal bureaucracy and corruption, the war on terror, racial ignorance and injustice and oppression, all leading up to 2012's Reign Supreme, which, quite frankly, is Dying Fetus at their absolute fucking peak. Their best writing, their best music, their best production, their best performances, their best everything, all on one absolute mammoth of an album. Frankly, any album released after Reign Supreme, no matter how good, was going to pale in comparison, but it doesn't really help that 2017's Wrong One to Fuck With, on top of not being Reign Supreme, was also a somewhat bloated and clunky album in its own regard, and occasionally far too edgy and stupid for its own good. Because of this, I feel like expectations for this album are higher than what they would be for your standard old school or brutal death metal band releasing a new album. This is without question one of the most highly anticipated death metal or extreme metal albums of the year. If you pay attention to extreme music in any capacity, this is something that has been on your radar since the moment it was fucking announced. And I'm happy to now report that not only is this new Dying Fetus album yet another collection of brutal, tasty, gnarly bangers, it's quite possibly one of the most sonically devastating and gruesome records of the year. Like, this thing is fucking filthy. This thing is fucking violent. This is brutal death metal with a capital motherfucking B. Opening number Enlightened Through Agony, for instance, is a thick, hearty, spicy, devilishly delicious stew of death metal riffs and beats and grooves and rhythms. Variations of colossal chugs and battering beatdowns twist and churn your insides like a gas station egg salad sandwich. The guitar tone is hefty and sharp. The percussion is, frankly, the clearest it's ever been on a Dying Fetus record. Like, right off the bat, this album feels like what should have followed Reign Supreme, but with the grittier, dirtier sound of Wrong One to Fuck With. The following number, Compulsion for Cruelty, keeps things moving along quite nicely with these waves of big, ballsy grooves. I like some of the more explosive pyrotechnics and dynamics that are scattered all through as well. I'm especially loving the bluntness and the ferocity and the menace of Throw Them in the Van. Definitely one of the most uncompromising and bloodthirsty cuts I think I've heard from Dying Fetus in a while. I like hearing some of the more like old school death metal riffs kind of like contrast with these extremely brutal beatdowns. It kind of feels like if Cannibal Corpse were trying to make something in the Dying Fetus lane. Then there's Unbridled Fury, which has some of the most revolting and sickening grooves on the entire record, very smartly sandwiched in between some more primitive caveman ooga booga mid-90s brutal death metal bursts. I especially love the suffocation-esque breakdown near the very end. Guaranteed this is going to have motherfuckers jumping and pounding and punching and fucking around in the pit. Maybe one of my favorite moments on the record, to be honest, though a close second would be the opening of Hero's Grave. I love the wailing shred metal antics and the crazy death metal guitar pyrotechnics with the absolutely blistering percussion. Everyone sounds fantastic on here. The production is great. The vocals are great. The guitars are great. Even the bass, has a nice, slimy, earthy presence in the forefront of the sound. It gives a lot of body to this. It definitely feels like Dying Fetus have acknowledged and corrected the errors of Wrong One to Fuck With as well. There's nothing quite as edgy or as stupid as the title track, and this album also isn't nearly as long, instead clocking in closer to about 38 minutes. The only real problem I could foresee there being is that if you really don't like Dying Fetus, there's nothing on this record that would change your mind. Dying Fetus are definitely one of those bands at this point in their career where they are kind of sort of making the same type of album over and over again. Sure, things are different lyrically across a lot of these albums, and the last couple especially have been dirtier and gnarlier and muddier, but even so, a Dying Fetus album at the end of the day sounds pretty much what you expect a Dying Fetus album to sound like, and Make Them Beg for Death is absolutely no exception to the rule. This also means there are no surprises and no twists and turns, which could, in theory, for a more casual or indifferent Dying Fetus fan, make for a more predictable listening experience. Personally, I really enjoyed this album. Is it the most progressive, intelligent, genre-bending, mind-blowing record of the year? No, but it really isn't trying to be. It doesn't want to be. It's a Dying Fetus record, doing what Dying Fetus is expected to do. And it does so very well, with some of the best, some of the tightest, some of the most brutal stuff I've heard from Dying Fetus in a decade now. I'm feeling a solid 4 out of 5, maybe leaning towards a 3.5 out of 5, but a 4 out of 5 nonetheless. I think this is great, and I think if you love Dying Fetus, you're probably gonna love this record too. I look forward to jamming this bad boy again, might pick it up on vinyl. I look forward to talking about this record potentially with John Gallagher. A couple of people really want me to interview him, and some of y'all who are going to see Dying Fetus in concert are going to try to ask him in person. If John Gallagher sees this message, feel free to send me a DM. Feel free to send me an email. Looking forward to talking to you. Once again, Make Them Beg for Death, 4 out of 5. I don't really have much more to say. It's just a great record. What more do you want? Check it out. Blast some beats and some riffs and such. Have fun. Cool. Okay. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.